Some moments change us when we least expect them. This is exactly what happened to me one winter evening when my grandson's friend stayed over for the weekend. I'm 55 years old and I thought I knew everything about myself. That life had a surprise waiting for me by the fireplace that night. Before I share what happened, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you reading this from? It makes me happy to know my story might reach people in different places. If this story means something to you, please hit the subscribe button and give it a like. These small actions help us build a community of people who believe in sharing real feelings and real experiences. Let me tell you about that special evening. My house was completely silent. My grandson, Matthew, had invited his friends to stay with us for the weekend. Earlier that evening, they were all downstairs having fun, laughing loudly, and throwing popcorn at each other. I was in the kitchen washing dishes, but honestly, I was just listening to them. Their happy voices made me think about when my own son was young and had friends over all the time around midnight. All the boys went upstairs to Matthew's room. I could hear them playing video games through the ceiling. I should have gone to sleep too, but something pulled me toward the living room. I love sitting by the fireplace. The orange flames dancing on the walls make me feel calm and peaceful. I sat down in my favorite old chair, wrapped a soft blanket around myself, and just thought about nothing in particular. Then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I thought Matthew was coming back for some water. But it wasn't Matthew. It was one of his friends. He stood in the doorway, and the firelight made shadows on his face. "Can I sit here with you for a little while?" he asked. I was surprised because he could have stayed upstairs with the other boys. But he stood there, looking both shy and confident at the same time. I pointed to the couch across from me. "Sure, come in. Can't fall asleep?" I asked him. He lifted his shoulders a bit and smiled. "Something like that. The fire looked really nice from upstairs," he said. He sat down on the couch in a relaxed way. He seemed polite, but also comfortable being there. I found myself looking at him with curiosity, the way you might look at someone sitting next to you on a bus. For several minutes, neither of us talked. The fire made crackling sounds that filled the room. I could feel the warmth reaching toward me. My hands rested on my blanket, and I wondered if I should say something first. But before I could speak, he did. "Matthew talks about you all the time," he said in a quiet but clear voice. That made me laugh a little. "Oh no. I hope he only tells you good things," I replied. "Mostly good things," he said with a grin. Then after waiting a moment, he added, "Matthew says you're the strongest person he's ever known." Those words surprised me. My throat felt tight. I spent so many years taking care of this family and trying to be strong when things got hard. But hearing these words from my grandson's friend felt very personal and special. "I'm not sure about that," I said, trying to act like it wasn't a big deal. But deep inside, those words touched my heart. After that, we started talking more. First, we talked about easy things like school and his family. Then we talked about bigger, more important things. He asked me real questions, not just to be polite, but because he really wanted to know the answers. How long have I lived in this house? Have I always liked winter? What was it like raising my children here? Every answer I gave made him ask another question. Soon I was telling him stories I hadn't told anyone in years. I talked about the nights I stayed awake waiting for my son to come home safely. I told him about my husband who died years ago, and how we used to sit by the same fireplace dreaming about our future together. And he listened to every word. He didn't just nod his head waiting for his turn to talk. He really paid attention, looking right at me the whole time. Somewhere during our conversation, I stopped thinking of him as just Matthew's friend. He became a kind young person sitting with me, connecting with me across our age difference through honest conversation and respect. He looked at me for a long time, and I saw something soft in his eyes. Maybe that's why I came downstairs tonight, he said quietly. I didn't know it then, but maybe I needed this. I needed someone like you to really listen to me. His words filled the room with a gentle sweetness I hadn't expected. I felt both honored and a little vulnerable, like he had touched a part of my heart I usually keep protected. Without thinking about it, I reached out and gently placed my hand on top of his. It was a simple movement, but it meant more than any words could say. He didn't pull away. Instead, he moved his hand just a little bit so mine could rest there more comfortably. The fire kept crackling, and for that moment, everything else disappeared. There was only the warmth of his hand, the light from the flames, and the quiet understanding that something special was happening between us. Something delicate and unexpected, but something neither of us could pretend wasn't real. After a while, I slowly pulled my hand back, not because I regretted it, but because I knew we needed to be careful. Still, I could feel where his hand had been, on my skin, in my chest, in my thoughts. When Matthew came back downstairs full of energy and stories, the special moment ended. We both smiled and acted normal, like nothing had happened. But I knew the truth. Something had changed between us. Something had started. That night, as I lay in my bed staring up at the ceiling while the house became quiet again, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I hadn't felt this alive and awake in a very long time. The next few days had a special feeling I didn't expect. It was like the firelight from that first night had spread into the daytime, making every conversation and every look different. I started noticing small things about him. The way he stopped to think before speaking. How he tilted his head when he listened carefully. The small smiles that appeared when he caught me looking at him. Life continued as normal, but now there was something flowing underneath the surface between the two of us. Even though we never talked about it directly. One afternoon, Matthew left to hang out with his other friends, and I was alone in the living room again. Instead of a fire, warm golden sunlight poured through the windows. But I still had that feeling of waiting for something. I didn't tell myself I was waiting. I just knew I would notice when he appeared. And just like I expected, he did. He walked in carrying a book he was reading and sat in the same spot on the couch. He looked up and our eyes met, and that understanding smile appeared. The smile that made me feel truly seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. I thought I'd try reading near the window today, he said. It seems like the right thing to do. I nodded and pushed a piece of hair behind my ear. It is. There's something about the light here. It makes everything else disappear for a little while. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt a warm feeling I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't exactly attraction, though there was a quiet awareness of that. It was something deeper, a feeling of being recognized, understood and valued. And in that recognition, I felt tenderness toward him, toward his youth, toward the honesty he showed. We talked about books and the stories that had shaped who we are. We talked about characters in books who felt like real friends instead of made-up people. His questions were gentle but thoughtful, the kind that made me stop and think about my own ideas in new ways. He asked about my favorite books, and as I answered, I realized I was sharing more than just which books I liked. I was sharing pieces of who I am that I hadn't talked about in many years. At one point, he closed his book and leaned back, watching the patterns the sunlight made on the floor. "I'm jealous of you," he said quietly. I blinked in surprise. "Jealous of me? Why?" He shrugged, looking both shy and honest. "You've experienced so much life, but you still find beauty in small things. I think most people lose that ability as they get older. But you haven't. You notice things. You care. You connect with people." His words stirred something inside me. I felt proud, but also a little sad. There had been years when I stopped noticing beautiful moments because I was too busy with responsibilities, sadness, and daily routines. Hearing him say this made me realize how much I had held on to, and how much I still had to offer. And it made me aware of how rare it is for someone to actually see these things in another person. I picked up my tea and took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through me. "Thank you," I said softly. "It means so much to hear that. Sometimes I forget too. But maybe noticing things, even tiny things, is what keeps us truly alive." He nodded, his eyes kind and understanding. "Exactly," he said. After that, we sat in comfortable silence. It wasn't an awkward, empty silence. It was full of understanding. I found myself studying his face, the way his hands moved when he talked, the small changes in his voice. I wasn't doing it on purpose, but we were forming a closeness. Not through words or touching, but through truly being present with each other. Later, as the afternoon light began to fade into evening, he moved a little closer on the couch. Just slightly, almost so small you might not notice. But I felt it. The warmth brushed against my arm, and my heart beat a little faster. Not because I was longing for something, but because I was aware. Aware that life can surprise you in unexpected ways, and that even at 55 years old, I could still feel the rare and precious stirrings of connection. "You make this house feel different," he said quietly, like he was testing the words before saying them out loud. I laughed softly and shook my head. "I think the house has always been this way. I just never noticed until someone came along to remind me." He smiled, and that simple exchange carried a weight I couldn't quite name. There was mutual respect. Yes, but also a delicate acknowledgement of something we weren't saying out loud. A shared understanding that some connections go beyond age, and some bonds are rare enough that they should be treasured, rather than labeled. As we lit the fire again that evening, and it cast dancing shadows on the walls, I realized something important. Moments like these don't last forever. They can't be forced or rushed. They can only be felt and treasured. And I felt everything. Every word, every glance, every quiet pause. I had discovered a new part of myself, a part that could still be moved and touched by another person's presence. A part that was still open to the wonder of human connection. By the time the night wrapped the house in darkness, we were sitting closer than before. We spoke in quieter voices. Our hands rested in our laps, near each other, but not touching. The room was alive with unspoken understanding, with the knowledge that life had given me a gift. Someone who saw me for who I truly was, without expectations or judgment. Someone who reminded me it's never too late to feel things fully, deeply, and respectfully. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, while the house breathed quietly around me, I felt a calm certainty. This wasn't a meaningless moment or an unimportant encounter. This was a real connection. Fragile, beautiful, and deeply alive. The last weekend of his visit came with a quiet tension that neither of us talked about directly, but both of us felt. The house seemed smaller somehow. The walls held memories of the past few days, like a secret we weren't ready to tell anyone. I spent the morning cleaning and straightening cushions, making sure everything was comfortable. But my mind kept drifting to him. To his presence, his quiet attentiveness, the way he made me feel both seen and at ease. Matthew spent most of the day with his other friends, leaving the living room empty except for the two of us. I think he stayed back on purpose, though neither of us said it. He sat down on the couch like it had always been his spot, and his eyes found mine almost right away. "I don't want this weekend to end," he said quietly, breaking the silence that had settled over us. I felt a pain in my chest, a mix of understanding and the bittersweet knowledge that all good things must eventually change. "I don't want it to end either," I whispered. "That even endings can carry something precious if we let them." He nodded, his gaze steady and serious. "I've learned more from you these past few days than I thought was possible. About patience, about noticing things, about life itself." I smiled, feeling the warmth from the fireplace reflecting in both our eyes. "And I've been reminded," I said softly, That connection doesn't have an expiration date. That sometimes, even when you think the years have passed you by, life gives you moments that really matter. We talked then, slowly and carefully, about things we hadn't shared yet. Fears, dreams, the weight of experience, and the freedom that comes when someone finally listens without judging you. There was a vulnerability between us, a rare honesty that made my heart swell in ways I hadn't felt in many years. At one point, he reached over and gently placed his hand near mine on the couch arm. It wasn't a touch meant to claim anything, but a touch meant to connect. I let my hand stay there, almost trembling with awareness. It was a quiet affirmation, a simple gesture, but it carried the intensity of everything we had shared in these few short days. The fire crackled and the room seemed frozen in a delicate balance. Between youth and experience, between past and present, between longing and restraint. I realized then how rare this kind of connection truly was. Not fleeting attraction, not superficial closeness, but something deeper. A meeting of hearts and minds that left both of us changed. However quietly, however subtly. He looked at me then, holding my eyes with his, and said softly, "You've shown me what it means to truly listen, to truly see someone. I don't think I'll ever forget it." "I won't either," I admitted. All of this has been a gift." We didn't speak for a long while after that. Words weren't needed. The silence was full of gratitude, full of understanding, full of the unspoken acknowledgement that life had unexpectedly opened a door for both of us. I could feel the weight of my past and the promise of the present mixing together in the room, a quiet symphony of emotion that neither age nor circumstances could diminish. As evening grew darker, Matthew came home with stories from his day. Laughter spilled through the hallways and life returned to its normal rhythm. But the connection between us remained, subtle but steady, like a thread woven through the tapestry of the weekend. When it was time for him to leave, I walked him to the front door. The night air was cold and crisp, carrying the smell of pine trees and earth. I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion we both felt. "For everything. For listening, for sharing, for being here." I smiled, feeling tears starting to form in my eyes. "Thank you for coming," I said softly. "For reminding me that life still has surprises, even at 55. He paused like he wanted to say something more, then simply nodded and stepped into the night. I watched him walk away, feeling the weight of the moment settle gently into my chest. It was an ending, yes, but also a beginning. A beginning of understanding myself more deeply, of appreciating life's unexpected gifts, of valuing connection beyond age or circumstances. I returned to the warmth of the living room and sank into my chair by the fireplace once more. The fire glowed softly, its embers reflecting the quiet energy that still hung in the room. I thought about the past days, about the conversations, the laughter, the silences, and the gentle unspoken bond that had formed between us. Life has a way of surprising us, even when we think we know all its patterns. And sometimes those surprises are quiet, subtle, and deeply transforming. Sitting there wrapped in my blanket with the soft glow of the fire, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing. For the first time in a long while, I felt fully awake to the possibilities of connection, to the depth of understanding between two people who met across different generations, but found common ground in the simple, essential truths of life: respect, honesty, and the willingness to truly see one another. In that quiet moment, I realized the story of that weekend wasn't just about a visit, a friendship, or even a connection. It was about rediscovering parts of myself that had been waiting patiently for someone to notice them, for someone to awaken the warmth I thought had faded away. As the embers of the fire settled into a soft glow, I smiled, knowing that life, in its quiet and unassuming way, had given me one of its most precious gifts. The reminder that it's never too late to be truly seen, to feel deeply, and to connect meaningfully, no matter your age. With that understanding, I let the night settle,